Why is there a person buried in the garden? What? After taking a moment to comprehend, I reflexively covered my daughter's mouth. Of all things, she had to speak up in a situation like this. Today was a joyous day, celebrating the new house. If my daughter said something out of line and embarrassed Ruby, I had no idea what she might do to her. My brother's words echoed in my head, "Ruby has a temper." For a moment, I thought it was all over, but somehow, I managed to smooth things over. Later, we enjoyed a pleasant time, and I began preparing to head home with my parents. My daughter was crouched in front of the flower bed, talking to something. Curious, I slowed my pace and ran over to her side. Then, in the next instant, I saw Ruby swinging a baseball bat down hard towards my daughter's head. "Sarah." I reached out desperately. I am Yvonne, 35 years old. I live with my 5-year-old daughter, Sarah. My husband, who is the same age as me, is currently working away, and we only meet a few times a year. Even if it's for work, it's lonely. Luckily, my parents' house is close to our place. Just about a 5-minute drive away. Because of this, my daughter and I often visit my parents. They adore Sarah and always welcome us. But there were a couple of issues when visiting my parents' house. First, there's this problem. "Yvonne, you're here again? Isn't that too often? There's no point in you being married off." "My bad." Those sharp words came from Ruby, my sister-in-law. Not only my parents, but also my older brother and his wife, who is my sister-in-law, were living in the family home. It was supposed to be a temporary arrangement. As my brother, Eugene, had bought a plot of land and was in the middle of building a new house. So until it was finished, they were staying at my parents' place. "Even if your husband's away, don't you think you're leaning on your parents too much?" Ruby, a year older than me, might not be a bad person, but she was assertive and a bit snide. That's why I've disliked her ever since she was dating my brother. Honestly, even now that they're married, I don't understand what my brother sees in her. I never understood why she was so hard on me, her sister-in-law. Moreover, she didn't seem to like children much, especially having it in for my daughter. "Grandma, let's play." As Sarah took my mother's hand and started bouncing, Ruby made an obviously displeased face. "Oh, it's so exhausting when Sarah comes over because she's so noisy. Yvonne, you really should discipline her more. It'll cause problems in the future." Such remarks made me feel uncomfortable. I only came because Sarah wanted to see her grandparents, but every time, Ruby's words gave me a headache. The second issue was about my daughter, Sarah. She has a strange ability to see things not visible to ordinary people and to sense certain things. At first, we couldn't believe it. But when we found lost items exactly where she said they would be, among other slightly eerie incidents, we started to believe. This was a family secret. So, we had kept it hidden from Ruby. I never imagined it would come out in such a way. The long cohabitation was finally coming to an end. My brother and his wife's new house was finished. They were going to move out immediately. I've been looking forward to this. Living together was tough. Ruby whispered to me, and I could only give a wry smile. It wasn't just tough for her. I was relieved that my parents' home was finally going to be a place of peace. My daughter looked at me curiously. "Mom, why do you act properly in front of Ruby? You're so laid back with Grandma and Eugene." "Well, you see. Eugene and I grew up together, but Ruby just recently became part of our family through marriage." My daughter didn't seem convinced. "Sorry, was that confusing?" "No, I got it. But it's a shame, isn't it?" "A shame?" As I cocked my head, Sarah nodded affirmatively. "It's such a shame. We finally became a family, and now we're gonna be separated again soon." "What?" When Sarah speaks with such conviction, it's frighteningly believable. Separated. Could it be that Eugene and his wife are going to divorce? While it would be a relief for me, I'd feel sorry for Eugene if he were to be upset. After all, they've just finished building their new house, and now to think they could divorce so soon. I couldn't make heads or tails of it. So I just made Sarah promise not to talk about it elsewhere and decided not to dwell on it. Sometime after Eugene and his wife moved, we were invited to their house. For the housewarming, we wrapped a nice sum of money as a gift, and the 5 of us, including my parents, Sarah, and myself, headed over. Eugene's house was about a 20-minute drive from our parents' place. Since my compact car is too small for 5 of us, we had to ask my father to drive his car. It was an old manual transmission, which made me nervous, but my father's a safer driver than I am, so it should be fine. To me, not being able to drive a stick shift, that's pretty impressive. When we arrived, the first thing that struck me was the sheer beauty of the place. A brand new build, indeed. The exterior alone was overwhelming. The yard was spacious, and there was even a brand new flower bed near the bay window. There weren't any flowers planted yet, just soil, but it was impressive nonetheless. Wow! It's so big! Sarah was gleefully running around the yard, shrieking with delight. Hey! Sarah! As I attempted to chase after her, Eugene stopped me. Let her be. If she wants to play in the big yard, that's fine. Oh, thanks. Taking Eugene's word for it, I halted. I kept an eye on Sarah to make sure she didn't stray too far. As long as she was in the yard, she wouldn't get lost or bother anyone. I found myself idly thinking how nice it would be to have a house. That's when Ruby came over, glaring sharply at us from a distance. Hey! Yvonne! You should be watching Sarah properly. Oh. Did she do something? Sarah had been running around, but she hadn't bumped into anything or broken anything. I didn't recall anything that should have caused an upset, but Ruby was angry. Do you normally let kids run wild at someone's housewarming? Don't you think it's bothersome? My apologies. Eugene said it was okay, so I just went with it. That's just Eugene being too nice to say anything. Don't take it to heart. I couldn't afford to upset Ruby any further. I had seen Eugene getting tossed around by Ruby's tantrums many times before. Sorry about that. I'll make sure she behaves. I went after Sarah, who had just darted past. Sarah! Chasing after her, I found her squatting by the flower bed, staring intently at the flower bed. All that meets the gaze is dirt. No flowers have bloomed yet. What could be so interesting? Sarah? What are you doing? When I call out from above, my daughter looks up at me and says, "Why is there a person buried in the garden?" What? After a moment to grasp what she said, I reflexively covered my daughter's mouth. Of all things, she had to say it here. It was housewarming for my brother and his wife. It's supposed to be a happy occasion, but if Sarah says something out of line, it could smear mud on Ruby's face. And if that happens, who knows what Ruby would do to her? Ruby has a temper, my brother's words come to mind. It seems my brother heard, but luckily, Ruby is engrossed in conversation with Mom and hasn't noticed. Look, Sarah. What a pretty house, isn't it beautiful? Let's go inside. I catch my brother's eye, his face a mix of emotions, and try to distract my daughter as we move. Of course, my hand remains over her mouth. But without any concern for my efforts, Sarah wriggles her face out from between my fingers and says, "Hey, Mom. It's weird. Why aren't we helping the person buried in the garden?" Sarah. It's fine. I'm gonna ask Eugene. Sarah slips away and runs to my brother. Grabbing his hand, she pulls him toward the flower bed. Seeing the expression on my brother's face, who knows Sarah's strength, is telling. Sarah. Do you see something? Reaching the flower bed, Sarah looks up at my brother and tilts her head. Yeah. Eugene, don't you see? We have to help them quickly. They're asking for help, calling Ruby's name. This was unexpected for both my brother and me, and we inadvertently looked at each other. Ruby is still talking with Mom. Ruby's name? Yeah, right here. My brother and I step closer to the flower bed. On closer inspection, the soil where Sarah is pointing looks slightly different in color. It's as if someone had dug it up once before. Chills run down my spine as the thought crosses my mind. What do we do, Eugene? What to do? We can't just ignore what Sarah says. It's not that we should ignore it because it's a child's words, but because it's Sarah's words that we can't. My brother returns with a small gardening spade from the back of the house. It seems insufficient for digging, but it's all we have. When we tap the soil, it feels unnaturally hard. As if something has been firmly packed to hide it. My brother, perhaps frightened, is cautious and can't put much force into the spade. Impatient, Sarah snatches the spade from him. "Come on, Eugene! You're no good at this! I will do it! Sarah, hang on!" I reach out to stop her, but Ruby grabs Sarah's wrist before I can. Having come over unnoticed, Ruby squats down to Sarah's level and smiles brightly. "Hey, Sarah, don't touch my precious flower garden." Relieved at Ruby's smiling face, I pulled my daughter Sarah closer. "That's right, Sarah. You can't just touch things without permission." "Sorry, Ruby." "No problem. But don't touch it again. Not ever." I felt a strange intensity coming from Ruby. I bowed my head to her again and tried to make a getaway to my mother Yvonne with Sarah in tow. But at that moment, Sarah once again pointed at the flower bed and shouted, "Look! That person is watching Ruby over there! Hey! Sarah! You're gonna scare Ruby with that kind of talk. Don't say things like that." Every time my daughter had said something like this before, the people who heard it turned pale and trembled. I imagined Ruby must be terrified, having such things said about our brand new home. "Sorry, Ruby, it's just a misunderstanding by Sarah." Trying to make amends, I looked at Ruby's face. No matter how much I might dislike Ruby, I felt bad for frightening her. I thought I had to get my brother Eugene to smooth things over too. But when I saw Ruby's face, I caught my breath. Far from looking scared, her eyes were wide open and she looked angry. "Sarah, is someone watching me?" "Yeah! They're asking for Ruby's help." Ruby just said, "Huh," and raised the corners of her mouth. Her eyes weren't smiling at all. For some reason, I found Ruby's face terrifying and I shuddered. "I'm sorry, Ruby." "It's okay. It's just kid stuff." Eugene quickly stepped in between me and Ruby, and the situation settled for the moment. We went inside the brand new house with our parents and they let us sit on the brand new couch. "Wow! It's so cushy!" It seemed Sarah's spirits had lifted in the new house as she happily sank into the couch. She seemed to have completely forgotten the earlier incident, and I felt relieved. We then ordered some takeout sushi, chatting and eating. Sarah must have been exhausted from all the excitement. Before we knew it, she'd fallen asleep on the couch. "Would you like to put her to bed upstairs? Should Eugene carry her?" "Really? Thank you. That would be good. We still have quite a while before we head back." It might be better than letting her sleep in the bustling living room. At first, I thought so, but then I had a bad feeling. "I think it's okay. She might feel lonely waking up alone." "Oh, she's already 5, right? She'll be fine. She can sleep here." "Yvonne, you're a bit overprotective, huh?" Ruby murmured that and smoothly rejoined the conversation with my brother and parents. Despite the short exchange, I couldn't stop sweating. After a while, Sarah woke up. "It's about time to leave." We agreed with our dad and started to get ready to go home. As I was cleaning up the table and washing the cups, my bored daughter tugged on my clothes. "Hey Mom, are we going yet?" "Just a bit longer, okay? We'll leave soon." "You're slow." Maybe it's because she just woke up, but Sarah seemed a bit cranky. I didn't want to deal with a tantrum right now, so I decided to hand it over to my mother. "Mom, can you please rinse these? Sarah is getting grumpy." My mother came running over, but Ruby blocked her. "Then how about Sarah and I play in the yard while we wait?" "The yard? Let's go." My daughter, thrilled at the thought of going outside. More than that, I was surprised that Ruby invited her to play. She isn't supposed to like kids, yet there I was, puzzled but thankful. "Thanks, Ruby. But we're about to head home." "It's just until you leave." "It's fine. Come on, let's go, Sarah." "Yeah." Sarah cheerfully responded and took Ruby's hand and they left. "It's strange. Ruby's not keen on children," Eugene said with a stunned face, watching them go. "I know, right? Ruby and my daughter have met many times, but I've never seen them play together." Sarah isn't shy with strangers and would happily approach Ruby, but I thought Ruby always kept her distance. Yet today, Ruby was the one who did the inviting. Something didn't sit right with me. I'm gonna go outside too. I rushed out in a hurry. Sarah was squatting in front of the flower bed, talking about something. Ruby was nowhere in sight. Curious, I slowed down my pace and ran over to her. The next moment, I saw Ruby swing a baseball bat at Sarah's head with all her might. It was a close call. I grabbed my daughter's arm and we both fell backwards. A metallic clang echoed through the yard. The bat had struck right where Sarah had been just seconds before. Hearing the sound, Eugene and my parents came outside.
What was that noise? Ruby?
Eugene, seeing Ruby holding the bat, was shocked. My heart pounding, I hugged Sarah tightly. That was too close. If I had been a moment later, Sarah could have. Silently, I looked up at Ruby. Her expression was angry or maybe emotionless.
What happened?
Eugene asked, suspicious.
Ruby, she tried to hit Sarah with a bat. What? I can't believe it.
Eugene stepped closer to Ruby in disbelief.
Is it true? Ruby, why would you?
Ruby just smirked. Come on, Yvonne. It was just a joke. Anger flooded over me and I snapped back.
A joke? What are you talking about? If that had hit her, do you have any idea what would have happened? It wouldn't have been just an injury.
As I was speaking, I realized something horrific. The end of the baseball bat was stained with something dark red. Noticing my gaze, Ruby let out a breath. Sarah was the one who started it, wasn't she? She shouldn't have said what she did.
What?
Before my eyes were involuntarily drawn to the flower bed. Could it really be that beneath there was a person buried, just as my daughter had said? Fear made my teeth chatter. My brother, concerned, kept me and Sarah away from Ruby.
What's this all about, Ruby?
It's nothing serious, just a joke. Maybe I went a little too far. My brother stared at Ruby for a moment and then decisively went to the back of the yard. He grabbed a small shovel and began to dig up the flower bed that Sarah had pointed out earlier.
Hey! Eugene, what are you doing?
Ruby tried to stop him, but she was no match for my brother's strength. He kept on digging. When he had dug a fair amount, he was speechless and clutched his head. Ruby also collapsed weakly beside him.
Eugene? Yvonne, call the cops. After that, just hurry, get Sarah and go home.
From my brother's unusual demeanor, I realized that my daughter's words were indeed true. My brother had found something that Sarah had mentioned. I immediately called the police. Surprisingly, Ruby was subdued until the police arrived. She was repeating "it's all over" as if in a daze, but she didn't become furious or try to run away. After the police arrived, I decided to stay with my brother while leaving my daughter with my parents. My mother was too scared to accompany him. My father offered to stay, but then we would be without a driver. My brother said, "I'm okay alone," but that couldn't be true. I couldn't leave my brother by himself.
Sarah, listen to Grandma and Grandpa and wait here, okay? Okay. Mommy, take care of Eugene, too.
Sure. I couldn't tell how much my daughter understood, but I promised her with a smile. My brother seemed to be talking calmly with the officer. I watched from a corner of the yard so as not to be in the way. Suddenly, Ruby's voice rose in anger.
I've told you. I don't know anything.
All right. For now, let's go to the office and you can tell us everything there.
You're just trying to pin this on me. I refuse to go.
The officer looked perplexed by Ruby's outburst. A female officer tried to grab Ruby's arm, but she shook her off and hid behind my brother.
Eugene, help me. Ruby.
My brother was flustered, holding Ruby's shoulder. He neither hugged her nor pushed her away. I could feel his conflict.
I didn't do anything wrong. It's a false accusation.
My brother probably wanted to believe Ruby's words. But just a moment ago, Ruby had swung a baseball bat at Sarah. Probably because if what was buried was revealed, she'd have trouble sealing the deal.
Ruby, if you're innocent, let's just go to the office for now, I suggested.
Ruby glared at me sharply.
No. What if the cops force a confession out of me? Tell that to Eugene.
Well, that's... My brother is probably still half in doubt. He just can't seem to turn Ruby away.
But, in reality, it was buried. Just by chance, right? It just happened to be someone buried there. We just unluckily bought this place. It's none of our business.
Hearing Ruby's words, I grabbed my brother's arm and involuntarily pulled him towards me.
Ruby, how do you know about this?
Huh?
Because Sarah told us.
I shook my head slightly.
Sarah only said there was a person there. She didn't mention any gender or age.
Ruby's mouth fell open in a small O, and her face turned pale. We hadn't been told by the police what had been buried yet. So, the only person who would know was the one who buried it.
But, just when I'm about to finally be happy, he had to come and ruin everything. All I wanted was to live a peaceful life with Eugene.
Ruby looked up at my brother pleadingly. My brother, holding Ruby's shoulders, shook his head in anguish.
I'm sorry, but this is just too much to handle. But you said you loved me.
I'm sorry. Ruby was trembling.
It was so close. I was so close to living as a classy homemaker in our new home.
Her hysterical screaming was frightening. Ruby was then taken away by the police. All I could do was silently stroke my brother's back as he shook with sobs. Later, we got a shocking call from the police. The person buried was Ruby's cheating partner. They had been involved for years, and he had provided financial support. When he learned of Ruby's upcoming marriage, he tried to interfere.
Give me back all the money I've spent on you, or I'll tell your husband everything.
That's what he threatened. In a panic and not wanting to be exposed, Ruby acted rashly. The flower bed had just been refilled with soft soil, making it an easy place to bury something. Ruby must have thought it safer to keep the body within sight rather than risking discovery in the mountains. Naturally, Ruby was arrested. My brother debated waiting for her to reform, but ultimately, they divorced. He couldn't forgive her for almost harming Sarah as well. He was devastated for a while, but slowly began to return to his old self. Unfortunately, he decided to sell the new house. But it was hard to sell due to its history. He kept thanking his daughter. If Sarah hadn't noticed, who knows what would have happened. Ruby certainly wouldn't have confessed. My brother joked self-deprecatingly about his poor judgment in women. Now, he has moved back into our parents' house. I visit every weekend, and they seem to be getting along well. This time it was all thanks to Sarah's sharp eye, but we'd had enough. So, we made a pact not to talk about seeing anything or anyone around others. She promised cheerfully. But as a parent, I hope her peculiar ability fades over time.